Welcome to Slow News Day Live. I'm Steve Poikonen. I'm here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California. And apologies to the people who are only here for Glory Jones. She is traveling with Loyola's basketball team. They're going to play Gonzaga. Put your money on Loyola. I don't know. I don't bet. But Glory will be back with us either tomorrow night or Sunday for sure. This is gonna be a little bit different, man, because this is like it has hometown impact for me. Joining me now is the founder of Food+Not+Bombs. He's in Santa Cruz, California. Keith McHenry. We have a lot of peripheral connections, and this is gonna be an interesting interview for like. Mostly because this is being monitored from afar in Mexico at an undisclosed location by one Commander X of the anonymous hacktivist collective, who is a mutual friend of ours. It's going to get weirder from here, Keith. So I want to thank you very much for being on the show. And if you could just kind of tell people what Food+Not+Bombs is, how long you've been around, and then we can go into the 786,000 times you got arrested for feeding people, and what's going on with City of Santa Cruz.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. So Food+Not+Bombs is a global movement, and we started in 1980 in Boston. I was a college student, and I was taking American history with Howard Zinn, and he wrote the book, A People's History of the United States, and he and I became friends over time. But that inspired me to go to a series of protests at Seabrook Nuclear Power Station. And then one of my friends was arrested there, and we bailed him out, had to raise money to pay back the bail, the guy who bailed him. And we started doing bake sales, which were completely unsuccessful. So oddly enough, I also had a movie company called Smooth Move, and I moved a family who had a poster that they were throwing out that said, "Wouldn't it be a beautiful day if the schools had all the money they needed and the Air Force had to hold the bake sale to buy a bomber?" So we dressed up as generals best we could, although we all had long beards. Mine was red at the time. And we went out there with our baked goods and our poster and tried to convince people that we're trying to buy a bomber, and of course they laughed, thought it was crazy, but it caught people's attention. And so oddly enough, we did a series of those kinds of actions, and I worked at a grocery store called Bread and Circus, and I was taking the produce that they couldn't use to the housing projects down the street from where the store was. And it turned out across the street they were building this huge modern building that turned out to be Draper Laboratory, where they were designing nuclear weapons. And that's where the name Food+Not+Bombs comes in. And that became kind of the pattern where I take food, and the other friends would take food to all the projects, to the battered women's shelter and so on. And then we would do street theater in Harvard Square or the Boston Commons every afternoon. And we decided to protest the Bank of Boston and the Federal Reserve Bank and Ronald Reagan by doing a soup line outside the stockholder meeting of the Bank of Boston, which was being held on Atlantic Avenue at the Federal Reserve Bank. And we were all going to dress up like hobos, and we had this flyer that we're going to hand out saying, if the policies of the bank and the Federal Reserve and Reagan continue, there will end up being soup lines on the streets of the United States. And we didn't do very good outreach, so we had like basically 9 of us to be both the servers and the soup line. So I went to the local shelter that had been there since the Great Depression, Pine Street Inn, and I gave a speech at midnight to the guys they were just sitting on tile benches and floor. They didn't offer beds or anything in those days. And they were all excited about the protests and the people that were at least lucid enough to know. And the next day, basically 50 people showed up and stood in line to eat at Food+Not+Bombs. And that was March 26, 1981. So we're just coming on the 40th anniversary of that historic event. And it was that day, the 8 of us decided we'd quit our jobs and do nothing but share food with people on the streets, and that we would continue to deliver food to other food programs and to housing projects. And so we did all quit our jobs, and then things got kind of, with no money, got a little hairy and stuff. Eventually, we all had to go back to work 6 months later when the landlady reminded us we'd never paid rent. And so that's what happened. But she was...
Oh, bummer. Crap. We go ahead and message Keith and try to get him back on here. We do it live, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it looks like he just totally dropped. Bunch of people didn't get notifications either, so that's fun.
That doesn't surprise me in the least. I guess while we're waiting to see if Keith can pop back in or not, I was talking to him before we went live about the first time that I encountered a Food Not Bombs. It was in Golden Gate Park. It was probably in like 1992. Because oh, there you are.
He's coming back.
Well, I hear you.
Oh, have him reconnect.
This is. Didn't I tell you guys it was going to be weird? I remember saying it was going to be weird.
Did. Have him reconnect, I think.
I will. Yeah. I'm gonna boot you, Keith, and then just come back in. Oh, there we go.
He's got it.
All right. At any rate, before we went live, he was telling me that when they started to do the soup feeds in Golden Gate Park, at one point there were about 2,000 people down there, and over 50 individuals got arrested. And one of them was our dear friend Commander X, and one of them was Keith. One of them was actually his now wife's sister, even though they didn't know. Let's see what we get.
There we are again.
All right.
Well, that was a glitch. Anyway, so I moved to California after this event with the local business association, and I started doing food at Golden Gate Park, and that's where you and I kind of enter the world together with Commander X and so on. And we set up at the entrance to Golden Gate Park. The city actually, after they made their first 9 arrests on August 15th of '88, then came back and said they would give us city buses to take the homeless to the National Guard Armory out by the ocean. As long as no one saw us and no one knew that we're feeding people, they were happy with us feeding people. And they didn't want the public to know that somebody was feeding people in such a visible location, and discussing the idea of diverting money from military towards education, healthcare, and other social services. And it was at that time in September of 1988 that Food Not Bombs was listed as one of America's most hardcore terrorist groups. And that began a pretty aggressive FBI surveillance operation and disruption that included very many unusual dirty tricks, some that we're more used to now. And yeah, we persisted. So we had 94 arrests in total in 1988. And then there was a tent city protest in City Hall a year later, and inspired by the Tiananmen Square campout in Beijing at that time. And that grew to several hundred people. Tompkins Square Park in Lower East Side also had this massive camp thing that was happening, and Food Not Bombs was sharing food there. And we started getting arrested again. And ultimately, these arrests inspired people to start their own Food Not Bombs chapters. And I made I'd written notes on this, on the starting the second group because I thought, well, this is a golden opportunity to have it systematized. And I wrote a flyer to respond to people's requests to starting groups called 7 Steps to Starting the Food Not Bombs, based on the notes I took when I started the group in San Francisco. And it wasn't long, by 1992, we had quite a number of groups, including Melbourne, Australia, Prague, Czechoslovakia at the time, Brixton in London, Toronto, England, Victoria, British Columbia, New York City, Boston, Washington, D.C., Richmond. There was a bunch of cities. So we had Baltimore, well, maybe not Baltimore yet, but then we had our first World Gathering, and that was in the 2 days before the protest against the 500th anniversary of Columbus invading the New World. And that's why we chose that time, because we wanted to provide food at that demonstration. And it was very inspiring. And we came up with the 3 principles: that the food is always vegan or vegetarian and free to anyone, rich or poor, drunk or sober. That we have no leaders, presidents, headquarters, or directors. That each chapter is autonomous and makes decisions using consensus and involving the people that rely on the food to help direct the direction of the group. And the third one is that we're not a charity, but that we're dedicated to taking nonviolent direct action to change society, so no one has to live in the streets or eat at a soup kitchen. And that has been that and the carrot and fist logo have been kind of the unifying things that have made it possible to be a global movement that is in Lebanon right now, that is on the West Bank in Israel right now, that is in Kiev fighting on the streets, that is in Myanmar fighting against a military dictatorship, that's in Chile fighting a fascist government there. So we were like, it's a global phenomena, and it's just it's almost, I've been fortunate enough to travel the world to visit these chapters in many places, Nigeria, Kenya, Ethiopia, all over Europe, Israel, the Middle East and Asia, Philippines, Indonesia, Canada, the U.S., Mexico, and Latin America. And it's just it's a global, decentralized, non-hierarchical community of people that, since the pandemic started, have been full out all the time in community. We're often the only resources for people in whatever community we're in, and that was particularly the case in the first few months of the pandemic. And here in Santa Cruz, we will be commemorating our 365th day of never missing a day sharing food, having the only reliable hand washing station in Santa Cruz, having the only free drinking water in Santa Cruz, and that will be on March 14th. And so we've been out there every single day, 100% volunteer, and it's just a freak out.
Unless I have to leave early to go to DC for our Assange events, because I may have to go early and build puppets, and we'll get to that. I will be there for that, because I would be scheduled to fly out the next day, so I make sure I'll come down for that if I'm still here. I've had the current mayor of Santa Cruz, Justin Cummins, on this show. It was in 2018. It was while they were still counting votes. He hadn't officially been elected yet. And he told me he would come back, and he has not come back. And he ran on, this is one of the reasons why this is so interesting to me, because the current mayor ran on fair and affordable housing, ran on not being as cozy with the developers as Santa Cruz has been in the past. And like, what we got done was we got Black Lives Matter painted on the street, and the homeless camp got like torn down and moved, and a bunch of people got scattered, and now you guys are facing the eviction and arrest for picking up the slack for California and Santa Cruz's failures to address their housing inequality situation and their economic disparity.
Yeah, it's technically speaking, the new mayor. So what happens is at the beginning of the year, the mayor switched. So Justin is no longer officially mayor.
That's right. That's right.
And Donna Myers, who is even more vicious, but who never said she supported poor people. In fact, she's a super rich person, and she's kind of famous for the fact that when real estate industry from out of town spent $750,000 to throw out the two progressive city councilors, Drew Glover and Chris Crone, and then funded a huge amount of money to put in pro-developer city councilors. Justin was Justin and Drew were the first two black elected officials for the city of Santa Cruz. Mm-hmm. And I worked on Justin's campaign too. And then we tried to convince him that the eviction of what was called Ross Camp was a very bad idea. He was the one vote that could have stopped the eviction. We got a temporary restraining order. That was our first lawsuit as the Santa Cruz Homeless Union. And we did get a TRO, which shocked the city because it was put together all by unhoused people. And but it got overturned eventually. They lied in court, the city, which is not unusual for them, and claiming everybody, the nearly 300 people living in that camp, which was a camp that was where the new chief of police at the time, Andy Mills, had told people to go there because he was trying to get people off the street downtown. And it was an ambush, which he had done in Eureka when he was the chief of police there. So it's the same pattern. The city manager, Martine Bernal, hired Andy specifically because he had such a good reputation of attacking the homeless in Eureka that they thought he would be a great one to have here. And he actually became famous, getting a lot of media because Andy Mills took a knee with Justin Cummings in a photo op with Jessica York, the Sentinel reporter behind them, and the Sentinel, and it was supposed to be like by accident that they all happened to meet here, but they actually organized a Black Lives Matter protest the day before the Black Lives Matter protest to try to scoop it. And needless to say, what they did is they took a knee in front of the anti-homeless fence that they had put up a few days before. And they had done a sweep of downtown. They had Justin Cummings and I met for several hours, which was fortunately videotaped, where he was trying to convince me to lure homeless people into his triage camps. So they had set up chain link fences in the parking lots downtown on around the 20th, maybe the 18th or 19th of March, and with a portable toilet in each one. And all the unhoused people were supposed to be funneled into these facilities and there for 72 hours during the beginning of the pandemic. But no food was going to be offered. Water eventually was going to be offered, but that was it. They swept the people from the post office. We had moved across the streets for social distancing purposes because we didn't want to have a line of 45 people standing next to our friends who were living in tents next to the post office. And then they put up fences around the entire area and evicted Food+Not+Bombs. That was our first eviction. Then we were evicted again twice from the county building, evicted again. We went to the benchlands, which flooded. All our belongings were destroyed. Then we moved back into town to a parking garage, garage 10. Then we realized it was too small. And so we moved to where we currently are, where we were evicted again, with the excuse that on the 200th day of nonstop serving of food, where we had a celebration on honoring the 200th day of daily meals. And so they evicted us, of course, on that day to the parking lot that we were at. And then a developer comes in last week and tells us they're about to build luxury condos there, and that we have to leave immediately. So we had to move. They were going to take our shipping container, so we had to hire a truck, move the shipping, to unload it, move it, and to back to the original location we were at. And now we're being told that we'll be arrested if we don't leave that location. And they're trying to claim that we could go to San Lorenzo Park, which is where we have an injunction against the city to stop the sweeps of that park. They're resisting that injunction. There'll be a status hearing on March 9th. And that's just totally insane, because what would happen is then an additional 100 people would be coming to these people's homes, these tents that they're living in, to get a meal. And that is about as ridiculous of a thing. Who would want to have 100 guests every day at your house? No one. So, and we think it's also, it would be hidden. No one would ever know where Food+Not+Bombs was. We'd be very similar to the issue that happened in San Francisco or Fort Lauderdale, Orlando. That's where I next, Commander X enters my world, is when I'm in jail in Orlando for feeding people. The problem there was a very liberal government, that liberal Democrats that wanted to get rid of Food+Not+Bombs and send us under a freeway into a caged area where you'd have to go to City Hall to get a key to get in there. No one would ever see us. We refused to do it, so they started making arrests. And then while I was in custody in Orange County jail, which was definitely, I've been in a lot of jails, and that is my least favorite. I get these requests for media interviews from TV companies, and I go out to do the interview, and they're asking me how I was able to do millions of dollars in damage to the tourist industry in Orlando from jail. And I had no idea. And I would love to see the clips of that. There must be online somewhere. But I was so stunned by the whole thing, because I didn't know that pictures of myself and of people in Food+Not+Bombs being arrested with the words "Free Keith McHenry, stop the arrest of Food+Not+Bombs" would be on all the tourist sites in the Orlando area. I had no idea how that happened. I asked the reporters, did somebody go up on a ladder and fall down because of this and get injured? They said damaged business. I asked if Disney World actually had a phone number. Maybe you could call them to book your holiday. But they seemed completely freaked out that allegedly millions of dollars of tourist dollars was lost to Orlando because of the arrest of Food+Not+Bombs and whatever Commander X was apparently doing at the time. Well, I don't know if he admitted to that or not yet, but anyway, that's why he is no longer in our community. So
no, he is. He already got asylum in Mexico, and that doesn't mean that the FBI still wouldn't really like to get him, but they can't.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like a limited number of people who actually know where the guy is, and none of those people live in the United States. You know, beautiful. So I mean, live long and enjoy retirement, Commander X. You earned all of that. You did.
You know, do you know of Jeremy Hamden's case?
So Jeremy right now, he's been out of the Oklahoma State Prison for just shy of 100 days. He's at a halfway house, and I mean, say this again, man, because it's getting hot. Like, if anyone is in contact with Jeremy, ask him what is going on so that we can like give better news when we talk about him on the Assange Vigil every week. Like, let me know.
That would be beautiful, because I know of him originally as a Food+Not+Bombs volunteer, and so it's one of the many people that have been Food+Not+Bombs that we're proud to be associated with because of their connection to Food+Not+Bombs, and who have been in prison for their activism. And you know, we have There was Eric McDavid, who was sentenced to 19 years. He's from Auburn, California, did Food Not Bombs. He was I actually crashed with him and his FBI informant at a gathering in Philadelphia, and I bought his informant him beer at the time. So I knew the alleged Sarah, which I think we now know her real name, but I forget her real name. He eventually got out after 10 years when the plot that he was convicted of turned out to be an invention of the FBI.
Funny and how that. Oh, yeah, I mean, the same thing with Jeremy too, because the FBI put Jeremy in that position.
Yeah, they gave him. They gave set him up.
Their informant the fucking everything that Jeremy would need, the exploits, in order to get in, and they sent him to go do that. So the FBI set him up. What do you think the overlap is between wanting people not to starve and becoming a political prisoner?
The overlap there, that I think is basically in a fundamental philosophy of two different systems. One, which is all about profit and corporate control, versus people just trying to live. And I think we're at this really interesting point. Like, so back to Santa Cruz politics, it's kind of a microcosm of what Food Not Bombs and other mutual aid groups are up against throughout the world, and particularly in the United States. So you have, on the one hand, people that robbed the American public during the housing foreclosure crisis of 2007, 2008, where the Obama administration did what was a cleverly named the TARP program, which really meant blue tarps to 5,500,000 Americans who lost their homes. That's what the TARP program was, a blue wave that hit America. And then the Obama's friends and Trump's friends and all the other friends ended up basically getting rock bottom prices on tons of real estate, which now need to put something on, and they're building luxury condos all over the United States, which will probably remain empty as the ones that here in Santa Cruz are. They're just vacant buildings with maybe 2 or 3 apartments and out of 200 being leased or owned. And why do we need? I think we now have something in the area of 4 major high-rise projects in the beach town here of Santa Cruz, and I think we currently have 5 large hotels being constructed right now. But we also have several thousand people living outside. It's very similar to my
building these fucking apartments and hotels for, Keith. You can't leave your house. You can't go anywhere. There's no tourism. Like
Yeah, it's incredible. And to leave people outside. So we have, like, on Mission Street, which is not really your Tony or neighborhood of Santa Cruz, there's a brand new giant Hampton Inn that's completely empty. Could take all the people that are now living along Route 1 outside of the homeless service center, the Housing Matters, which is a scam of its own, and which they're planning to try to drive everyone out of, of that area into doorways. So back when Justin Cummings was well, he's a city councilor still, but when he had the chance of voting against kicking out Ross, they kicked out. So they claimed to a federal judge, and this is what they're trying to navigate right now with the camps that exist, and they're trying to create a new anti-homeless law that will somehow qualify under the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling Martin v. Boise, where it's considered cruel and unusual punishment to not provide housing to people, and at the same time to be ticketing them for living outside. So, essentially, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals says that you have to leave people alone that are living outside, unless you can provide them with an indoor shelter. Well, with Justin Cummings and Ross Camp, they forced roughly 300 people out into doorways. They put, of the 300, 60 in a kind of like a little prison camp, but on Highway 9. They gave 2 nights in a hotels to 20 people. On the third night, they were camping around the hotel they'd been given vouchers for, and then everybody else went to doorways into the woods. And the named plaintiff of our lawsuit against the city, Desiree Quintero, was subsequently killed when a tree during the Diablo winds, a redwood tree, crushed her to death as she was trying to help another family who had been evicted from Ross Camp get out of harm's way. So we have at least one direct murder as a direct result of Justin Cummings' failure to defend the people at Ross Camp. Then as mayor, he was even worse than he was as just a lame city councilor. And now the new city councilor, who I was earlier talking about, Drew Glover, who was another African-American city councilor, who was attacked by the real estate industry and by the current mayor.
Was subjected to one of the grossest smear campaigns I've seen in Santa Cruz politics.
Yeah, it was dirty. He eventually was so... He was like born and raised here, you know, and he got smeared, accused of things that didn't ever happen. And then he now left town because it was just such an ugly situation, how they treated him. And we're currently right now, you know, we're getting, there's a number of people that are threatening to kill the people at San Lorenzo Park online all day, every day. We had somebody from a group called Take Back Santa Cruz. We were down in the benchlands.
Fuck those guys.
Yep.
Fuck you. Come see me. I'm in the mountains where you're afraid to go, but come see me. Let's talk.
Yeah, exactly. And they and then some of them are actually volunteers on the volunteer cops, and they work in coordination. And they came and stole the banner that's behind you, which I hand painted years ago. They actually went on Facebook and said, "Let's go steal Keith's banner." And then 30 minutes later, they stole it. And of course, the police did nothing. And that was, you know, that's just normal, the coordination between Take Back Santa Cruz and the police department. And they actually been coordinating this new law that was before City Council last night. That oddly enough, everyone was shocked. Justin voted against it, although that's because there was no possible, you know, his vote didn't count, it didn't matter, because the majority voted for it. And one of the ideas is that, like, you can't set up a tent. You know, this was his compromise. You can set up your tent only after an hour after sunset. That was the big liberal change, but you still have to take it down by 8 in the morning and carry all your crap around with you all day long. And you're supposed to have a watch on you or a cell phone that has power. 2 things that many people living outside do not have. So you could, and if you're busted for doing that, your first fine allegedly is $20, then it's $40, then it's as much as 6 months in jail, misdemeanor crime. But there's also the other catch is there's no physical place you're legally allowed to be with this tent, according to this ordinance, even if you happen to know that it was an hour after sunset, and if you happen to have the energy to put up a tent at that time. There's just no physical place available according to this new law. They took some of the most egregious things out of it, which is you could have, before the pandemic, the suggestion was that it would be, I think it was like 8 to 8, but that had been changed. Plus, you could choose to work for the police department or get a citation. So I have friends now who were in the old law were arrested or ticketed for sleeping outside. Your ticket was $179. You didn't pay that within 21 days. You got an assessment of $300. And I have one friend that finally got off the street, moved into a vehicle, got a full-time job, only to discover that $200 of paycheck was garnished from his wages to pay for his camping tickets. Currently, they're also giving $300 tickets to people that are found to live in their vehicles, which this is a growing phenomenon because the economy is collapsing and the number of people becoming unhoused is huge. And we're looking at roughly 40 million people who are facing eviction in the next coming months. And it would be shocking, considering all that's going on in Washington and in California State House and in the county and the city here in Santa Cruz, that there will not be literally thousands of additional unhoused people on our streets sometime, this summer. And no plans to deal with it, no plans at all. And they haven't had any plans. I went to city council here in Santa Cruz in 1988 and encouraged the city council to build single room occupancy hotels for people. Then there was the earthquake in 92. That's what it was, right? No, 89?
89.
October 17th, 89. There was all this new federal money to come in. They built a little bit for low-income people, like they retrofitted the St. Charles, but they took most of that money and just made luxury retail spaces and condos with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the pattern.
Yeah.
No.
Jesus Christ. And people have this idea of California as I don't know, somehow communist I've been trying to explain to people that Santa Cruz is where good NPR liberals go to die, in the same way that Orange County, according to Ronald Reagan, is where good Republicans went to die. And the relationship that our local government has with developers and tech corporations has just brutalized the entire working class, but has been specifically harsh on our homeless, because the crime is being seen being poor.
Yeah.
Right. The crime is being seen being, living outdoors. That's the crime. And when that's the underlying thing you're trying to avoid, it seems like it poisons the soul of everyone who gets involved with it, at trying to legislate around it or ordinance around it, instead of simply addressing what the problem is. And the problem is that the average cost for a 2-bedroom rental right now is like $2,800 a month.
Yep.
Well,
that's a good price, sadly, for our community. People are, whenever I've had to, I'm a couch surfer by habit, but when I have looked for apartments, it's like $1,000 to share a room with a college student. That's insanity, but that's mostly what you find out. Not that college students are bad; it'd be very nice, but when you're 63 years old, you don't want to really live on a bunk bed in a room with a poor person that's struggling to get an education and losing all their money to student loans. So it's tragic, but and then to leave all these buildings empty. So it's interesting. There's this the Rittenhouse building, which is on Pacific Avenue, which is where they regularly ticket people for performing music because they've never actually rented the retail space on the first floor. So people try to perform there. I think recently the police have laid off on ticketing people for performing, because I think of a state lawsuit that happened. that impact street performers all across the state. But that building is where Looker, which is a surveillance software developing company, has its offices, and Google bought them for $2 billion. That's just one example of where the priorities in this community are. So it's so a lot of the housing here is second houses. They've done nothing about, and as you were pointing out, the idea that there's going to be this huge tourist crush coming at the end of this pandemic is an illusion. I mean, if you have 40 million Americans currently behind on their rent facing eviction, that's very unlikely that those people are going to go on vacation and spend $100 a night in a hotel. Now, here there was in California news. It seems to me that governments all the way from Biden down to city council, and that was one of the horrible things that Justin Cummings did as mayor, is he put out an email about rent subsidies, which turns out to be the same program that existed for 30 years here in the county, run by a really great organization here, Community Action Network. And it was the same program that always existed, but he gave himself credit that this was the city's program. And so that was like an incredible slap in the face. So anyway, so then you have Operation Room Key by the governor of California. So people should know, if you're not in California, all the most important players in this state are liberal Democrats, right? So that's why we also allegedly have half of all unhoused people in the number is supposed to be that 1 in 2 homeless people are homeless in California.
Fifth largest economy in the world.
Yep, run by liberal Democrats.
Related to Nancy Pelosi, by the way.
Yeah, I have a long history with Nancy. I used to run my when we were getting arrested in San Francisco, I lived in the
Feinstein was mayor, right?
She had been mayor, right? She just left being mayor when I started Food+Not+Bombs in San Francisco. So she's 87.
What was his name? Argnos or something like that?
Art Agnos, the social worker, became the mayor. And Nancy Pelosi was the congressperson, and Feinstein became the senator, and Barbara Boxer was the senator. And Feinstein's office overlooked the arrest of Food+Not+Bombs every single day. And so I also ran my dog Pluto and Bear in Mountain Lake Park in the Richmond district. And almost every afternoon, Monday through Friday, Michael Yaki, Nancy Pelosi's chief of staff, would bring his little white dog there. And we would talk as we threw tennis balls for our dogs. And so I would go to her office. I actually she gave a town hall meeting at Fort Mason Center, and I complimented her on her great human rights support for the people of China, which I knew was actually a complete scam. But anyway, she's trying to make hay, saying that she was against child labor there that she helped facilitate the creation of. But so anyway, I said, well, you may not know this, but there's a human rights violations right here in San Francisco with the arrests of people for feeding the hungry and so on. And maybe you could take a position on that. I was, at that time, I was representing San Francisco Liberation Radio, which is one of the many pirate radio stations that we help promote. And I think we have roughly 400 stations in the US and Canada. And so anyway, I was asking for a program I had, Voices of Rebellion, on San Francisco Liberation Radio. And of course, she had me immediately arrested and taken away for asking that question. Then years later, I'm in Kansas City, Missouri, and I'm riding my bike down a state line. A young, attractive woman runs out of this building, freaking out that she thinks her house is on fire. I go and check it out, no problem. She asked me out on a date. Wow, exciting. We go on a date. I stupidly discuss my actual life with her, which is kind of a nice thing to do. She told me about her wonderful life growing up in Marin and being the head of nursing at KU. Then she calls me up for a second date. Whoa, I was impressed. So she calls me up. We go to this vegan restaurant in the plaza, and she tells me she had Thanksgiving dinner with Nancy Pelosi, and she does every year, and she knows the real story, that I am a domestic terrorist. And all that I told her about getting arrested for feeding the hungry in San Francisco was a complete fabrication. Although, of course, anybody can Google it and find zillions of articles about it. But so I, I find it interesting when she was recently, this would be a good clip, where she was talking about how on CNN or something, she got into a fight with Blitzer or something about how she's feeding people in San Francisco. I don't know if you recall that a few months ago. But of course she's not feeding people in San Francisco. She's arresting people for feeding people in San Francisco.
So who was the chick in Kansas City?
So I don't remember her name, but she was the head of KU nursing school. She's really nice person.
We'll find out.
That would be in the year 2000.
Keith, this is a lot like being able to go back in time and killing baby Hitler, except for it's adult Hitler, and you didn't do that. And
exactly.
Disappointed.
Yes. So anyway, yeah, it was. So I find it interesting that the connection between I just like to make the point. I think Jimmy+Dore actually gave me this idea, which is funny, that everything is run by liberal Democrats in our state, and it's a totally failed state. So not that Republicans are necessarily any better, but I have to also point out that we do not get arrested in cities where the city government is controlled by Republicans. And I'm not a Republican. I'm not in support of any neoliberal economic policies, none of that kind of stuff. I'm an anarchist. I've been an anarchist since about 1965, when I read Walden by Thoreau and On Civil Disobedience, and then that got me interested in the Yippies and all the different things going on. So
my mom was an English teacher, right? And when I was really young, she had me read Walden and she had me read On Civil Disobedience. I mean, I was like 11,
Yeah.
And I was sold. Yeah.
I was too. I mean, for me, the Vietnam War was happening. I could see like he wasn't wanting to pay for the Mexican-American War or to support slavery. Well, we had, my school when I picked up Walden was segregated. We have white-only school. We still had in our town in Luray, Virginia, colored-only, white-only bathrooms and water fountains. Every store downtown had a prominently displayed "No Jews Allowed" sign. You could go to the Ben Franklin 5 and 10 and buy a whites-only, colored-only sign or a "No Jews Allowed" sign to place in your store. They were manufactured by Wamco or some large corporation, made all the signs so that you could be appropriately segregated. And then when they desegregated, this would be about 2 years after I read Walden, they declared all the black people from the west side of the railroad tracks mentally retarded and put them in special education so they wouldn't interact with the good white people of our town. I was in special education because I was from out of town and I had dyslexia. But to the people of Luray, if you were at all out of town, a person of color, or any peculiarity, you had Down syndrome, and they were put in this class. So I had Down syndrome from fourth, fifth, sixth. Yeah, I had Down syndrome till fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and then suddenly cured once I left Virginia. To ultimately write several books and start a global movement. So. Yeah, nothing wrong with having Down syndrome if you, in fact, actually, the actual white people that had Down syndrome in my class were beautiful. And it made the class actually really wonderful to have all black people, 3 people, white people with Down syndrome, and myself. It was a very nice environment to be in, quite frankly, even though it was also violent because you had to get, beat with boards by the teachers and stuff like that, like a normal public school. And anyway, that's how I ended up being influenced into becoming an anarchist. And I was in the 4th grade temporarily a communist because the Soviets were doing better at space flight than the Americans, and then I realized that was a stupid reason to have a political point of view in the 4th grade. So I moved on to anarchism in the 5th grade, and then I've been that way ever since. And now that's like over 50 years later.
Yeah, I generally credit Clean LSD and Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell and good punk rock for, you know, my formative political philosophies.
Yeah, that's something we share. That's something we share. Boy, I miss Art Bell. He was great, man. It was what a interviewer. Boy, he was an artist.
That guy was, he was the best. He was. What I love about Art Bell is that even when the caller was just off their rocker, or even when the guest was just clearly not on the right track, he treated everybody with respect. He treated everybody like a human being. You know, he let everybody tell their story, and he was wonderful. He
was against censorship. I remember once, so he had had a person on, a couple of people. One was the fidget guy here from Santa Cruz, and I have friends that were with him when he made the phone call, and that was a fascinating call. He kept him on for the whole show, or 2 hours or so. And then the other one was that there was a person called up that said that they had known of the Son of God from Calabar, Nigeria. Well, oddly enough, I had met the Son of God in Calabar, Nigeria, and spent some time with him. So I thought, wow, that's interesting. Very few people actually get the chance to hang out with the Son of God in Calabar, but I did.
So does the Son of God have a name, or is it like a tribe called Quest and you just say the Son of God of Calabar, Nigeria, or like how does that work?
I quite frankly, I don't. It's Obi is his name. He's got 3 O's. His initials, and which were the initials of his father. Was kind of surprised that God died but did, and left the son to run things. It's also the Brotherhood of something or other. It's essentially what happened was a woman studying primates in Cross River had met this person who was as a teenager in the jungle, and they got to hanging out, and she felt he had magical powers. She was from London, and so she somehow in their relationship, it ultimately became a church, and they have a church in London called the Elephant Church, and it's a very unusual. It's supposed to be a vegetarian religion, although the Obi seemed to like meat for being a vegetarian. And the reason I got to meet him is because a scam artist was trying to divert my attention, so that he had invited me there to Nigeria earlier, and it turned out it was like a ruse. But I had found some amazing young people who are still doing Food+Not+Bombs in Nigeria, and he was like trying to splinter me off from them because his goal was just to get money, and I spent like a month. I got kidnapped with him and others at a massacre site the day after 100 Muslims were killed by Christians in a town near the Niger River. That was exciting. I got arrested, but I ended up doing a press.
Don't say.
I got arrested by the Nigerian police, but I ended up doing a press conference where I gave him a copy of one of my books, and he became a dear friend. I also got to, I was given $1,000 in Xerox $100 bills by the Minister of Public Works in Abuja, and it worked fine. I had no problem getting things with my Xerox hundreds. Got to finish the tour that way and buy a lot of good equipment for Nigeria's Food+Not+Bombs. I bought a stolen vehicle on the port of Lagos. That was a lot of fun.
Oh, well, come on, Keith. Who can't say they haven't bought a stolen vehicle on the port of Legacy? You're a Tom Robbins novel. You know that, right?
I mentioned Tom Robbins in my book that I'm working on right now, that I'm supposed to just be doing all the time, but I'm always fighting the city of Santa Cruz or some crazy thing. But yeah, I've like 600, I think it was up to 140,000 words, and I'm writing the Nigerian section right now. And I don't really have the working title right now is the Food Terrorist Diaries. I don't know if that. The mayor of Orlando said I was a food terrorist. Yeah, and then he ended up a couple years later with the Pulse massacre. That's actual real terrorism.
Well, and Monsanto is actual food terrorism.
That's food terrorism for sure. And yeah, that's hardcore, man. GMOs. Yeah, I think we're back in the big GMO deluge again with the Biden administration, since they've got Mr. Monsanto as Department of Agriculture. So and then Obama was super big. I remember I went to the World Food Prize, Occupy the World Food Prize action in Des Moines, Iowa, where Monsanto gives out the World Food Prize, and the Obama State Department was there to give the award out and talk about the wonders of GMO foods, industrial animal agriculture, and the TPP. Those were the
State Department.
Things. Yeah, U.S. State Department. Yeah,
not the FDA or not like Health and Human Service. The State Department.
Right.
That should raise a few eyebrows.
Exactly. It was really it was an unusual situation. And it was, fortunately, he wrote an op-ed in the Des Moines Register, which I got to read that morning. So my speech that night was point by point contradicting his 3 points, which were the beauty of GMOs, animal agriculture with feedlots, and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is now coming back again, fortunately, for the wealthiest corporations on earth. And that's what the struggle, for example, in India is about currently right now. I mean, currently, there's like worldwide uprisings against lockdowns, austerity, fascism, and corporate capture of society. And I think the most impressive one probably right now is the farmers' strikes in India, and we should have a general strike here. I mean, no one got their $2,000 check.
Their $2,000, $1,400, gonna be $900, probably $600 checks.
Yeah, and maybe by the time of this broadcast now, they've got Office of Management and Budget who will be confirmed, and she will go in and cut Social Security for us, as I think is proposed in the bailout bill, which was just endorsed by the largest banks in the world, and Google and other transnational corporations that are thinking receiving another $1.9 billion of taxpayers' money is a really good idea. And that's where we're at now. I mean, we're definitely going into a economic Great Depression that's going to be even more road warrior and psycho than the last Great Depression. And we'll look quaintly at Grapes of Wrath and Steinbeck's writings, and you know, by the time this thing comes down, and you know, before the pandemic, I made a flyer. Well, I made a couple of flyers for city council. One was because when the sleeping law was around, it was suggested by the Victor, head of the superintendent of the Parks Department here in Santa Cruz, that people do meth to stay awake so they don't violate the sleeping ban. So I made a flyer saying that the city council is considering distributing free meth so that people could be in compliance with the sleeping ban. And then I put the sleeping ban law word for word off their website below it with the city logo. It shut down their phones for 2 weeks, apparently. Ended up there with an article in the Mercury News saying that wasn't real. But they received roughly 50% of the calls were people who wanted free meth and 50% of the calls were people that didn't want the city council to hand out free meth. So that was interesting. So then on September 19th of
Wait, hold up.
2009,
I just want to appreciate that for like an extra moment, because that's beautiful. That is. Kids, if you're paying attention at home, what you do, just rewind back like 45 seconds, but you can repeat this exercise. You can.
You can. So I did another flyer saying that come to city council on September 19th of 2019 to find out about the city council's plans for the global economic collapse. And I gave suggestions like shelter in place. I actually use that in your house. Plans to use abandoned retail spaces, moratorium on evictions and mortgage. I had a few proposals. Then, of course, they didn't do anything. There was no planning for a global economic collapse, and there still is none. And now they've got a global economic collapse on their hands, and their idea is let's drive Food+Not+Bombs out of Laurel and Front Street, out of a parking lot that no one parks in, that has one of the few portable toilets in the city available, and there's no businesses. The business across the street's abandoned because they're building a 7-story luxury condominium there, and there's just nobody. It's an abandoned area of Santa Cruz right now, and so the corporation there, what was that? Anton
Demco.
Demco. It's like really psycho company. They come there last Wednesday and say, hey, you got to move your shipping container and all your stuff. See, we're preparing for the Great Depression. So we're not messing around. Obviously, the city's not going to feed people. The county's not going to help people. The only people going to help people are the people that are already helping people, and that's us. And the community people that hover around us trying to help people. And so it's pretty outrageous that they would jack us up and kick us out when the first week we were sharing food before we were evicted from the town clock. And there was a couple of guys going to this high-end restaurant, and the very nice owner, African-American guy that owns it, Owens, or Oswald's, and they were about to break the window out of it to go in and get some food. And one of our volunteers goes, oh, wow, you don't need to break the window out of this building to get food. We're serving food 2 blocks down that way. And they're like, oh, great. And they will go down and eat with us, and they just eat with us even today. So the thing is that there's a lot less looting in Santa Cruz downtown as a direct result of us doing what we're doing. And we raise all of our own money. We take nothing from the city. I put up, right when Operation Room Key was announced by the governor, and that was just a press release because not much ever really happened. I think they might have had, of the 500,000 people that they say live outside, they've got 20,000 in hotel rooms in the state. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I happened to sell farmland that I was doing the free school on in New Mexico for years, where I was teaching permaculture, how to do Food+Not+Bombs and Adobe construction and so on. I sold that piece of land, and I took that money and I got hotel rooms for 180 people here in Santa Cruz, because it was announced by the CDC that everybody needed to be in a hotel room. And the governor was going to give had $500 million, $500 million available to do that, and had signed a proclamation that the city and counties could just commandeer buildings and buy them and put the unhoused in them. Yeah. So I did that. Now I'm being investigated for designing fraudulent hotel vouchers. And the case the case will be fortunately cleared on March 25th if they don't indict me by that time for this. But they were not fraudulent hotel vouchers. Every single hotel voucher had $100 behind it, or $50 if it was two people going to be in a room, that I paid for out of my pocket. So, and I did that as long as I could. I spent $20,000. I ran out of money. I was working with Justin saying, you've got to start putting people in hotels. This is crazy. You have empty hotels all over town and never going to see a tourist again for the next 10 years. So, hey, why don't we have a solution? But he did nothing. There was an empty building across the street that was just completed. I suggest that I help him go in and figure out how to buy that building, put everybody in that. That was another 275 units at the corner of Pacific and Mission Streets, Water Streets. And no, nothing's going to happen there. They're renting to like a half dozen people in that building right now. So, that's capitalism at its best. But in the end, it's going to be people like us that are the ones that are responsible for people surviving.
Yeah.
It's not going to be the city, the state, the county, the federal government. The Biden administration, it just shows how callous that these rich people are. That they're just going to let millions of people wander the streets of America, and then all over the country, Food+Not+Bombs is involved in defending people from being evicted from their homeless camps and being evicted from their apartments. And it's a total collapse as far as working people are concerned. But it could also be a beautiful thing, because it does show that we're going to be removing our dependence on corporate power and on these corrupt governments, because we're going to have to do it our own. And it's about time we start doing it our own. And I feel like doing this for 41 years has given us a really good perspective on what is needed for people to live, outside, and those things are like food, sleeping, water, things like that.
Yeah.
The little things that the people in power just apparently are hoarding and will not share with the rest of us.
How can people help Food+Not+Bombs?
Well, you can go to foodnotbombs.net, and for example, there you could go to volunteers page, and on the volunteer page you could find out all the different types of things one can do to volunteer for your local Food+Not+Bombs. Or there's the 7 steps to starting a Food+Not+Bombs, which is on the other main link on that. And I've been you could follow those directions. You could then email me, keith@foodnotbombs.net, and I'll send you like the documents and stuff to help you get started. I've been doing Zoom meetings with groups when they're starting their first starting their Food+Not+Bombs chapter. This is happening like virtually daily now. There's new chapters. And so that is really important. You can donate at the donate button up there. And we basically panhandle $5 a person per month, something like that. $1. A lot of people just donate $1 every month. That's what they do. Sometimes people just donate $8, and that's fine, because that's, we're not out trying to, make money. We're just trying to, distribute money and distribute the energy and help people. We have a toll-free number that's the hunger hotline, 1-800-884-1136. That's on the website itself as well. We have a map that shows you all the chapters in the world that we are conscious of, with the best information we can have as to what's going, what they're doing. But I'm sure we've missed many groups. I know there's like at least 100 groups in Russia that we don't have contact addresses with, but know that exist, for example.
When we get you on Anonymous Bites back to do, more or less this, but with different words, and a couple of different hosts, we'll make sure that, and I'll reiterate it now, but we'll make sure that a call goes out to the Anons in Russia to help build up the Food+Not+Bombs locale database, as it were, because those are going to be the guys who know, because more than likely they're the people feeding the people.
Exactly. And it's incredible, isn't it? Yeah. We have some correspondence with the Well, in Russia, for example, the first Food Not Bombs person murdered while doing Food Not Bombs was Tamir, who had a punk band called Sandinista in St. Petersburg, Russia. Nazis attacked the meal, stabbed several of our volunteers, and Tamir did not survive. And then a few weeks later, neo-Nazis put a time bomb at our meal in St. Petersburg, but we were late and it just blew up a flour kiosk and put a huge hole in the concrete. We did have 3 other volunteers killed by neo-Nazis in Russia, but that's been about 20 years ago since the last person was murdered. We've had 4 volunteers killed in the Philippines during the drug war, where they were ambushed, or the Food Not Bombs house was invaded by people who tortured 2 Food Not Bombs volunteers, putting hundreds of cigarette burns all over their bodies before killing them in their living room.
Jesus.
So we have a few things like that go down. So and then we have we've had, like I say, quite a number of people go to prison on being framed on terrorism charges. We had the Cleveland 5. 3 of those people were Food Not Bombs volunteers. They got 10 years in a plot that the FBI organized to frame them.
Yeah,
a lot of the white people that have been convicted of domestic terrorism had their roots in Food Not Bombs. Bill Rogers is a very, very dear friend of mine, and I was hanging with him right before his arrest. He was running a bookstore in Prescott called Catalyst, and he helped start Tucson Food Not Bombs. He helped start Prescott, Arizona Food Not Bombs, and then he was found dead in his cell on December 21st of that year. I forget the year it was. He was so many of the people in the Green Scare were, in fact, I think almost every single person in the Green Scare had a direct connection with Food Not Bombs at some point close to the time that they were apprehended. And in 2009, I happened to watch another State Department lecture, interesting, on C-SPAN, where they compared the people that shared the vegan meals in the parks with the Al-Qaeda, who was more dangerous. And they said that Al-Qaeda probably would not last another 20 years, but the vegan people doing the vegan meals might last another 30 for sure, because they were indigenous to their community. They were loved by the local people, and they could potentially influence the public to think money should be diverted from the military towards education, healthcare, and other social services. And I was kind of stunned at seeing that. Actually, I had just spoken at Princeton earlier that night, and was being treated to the same bed that Condoleezza Rice had stayed in when she spoke at Princeton. Very impressive.
What?
A bed that actually had a remote control. It was the only bed I ever was in that had a remote control. And so I was watching this lecture.
Does the room smell like War Criminal?
And it certainly did. I had to sanitize that room. It was
every
creepy.
time I go to DC, I feel like I need to smudge my soul, and I can only imagine. Wow.
I know, that was funny that the woman running the place thought that I would be impressed by that. It was impressive, but in a very morbid sort of way. And then I spoke at Harvard Law, and Harvard Law, Harvard has a rule against paying people for speaking. So they just gave me a vegan cake to speaking to the National Lawyers Guild club at Harvard. Anyway, I came home to my dad's place and tuned on, and I saw that same State Department lecture, and I'm like, okay, I was not hallucinating yesterday or the day before, and this is an actual real thing that they're still declaring us a hardcore terrorist group. And then when 9/11 happened, I was working for United Way in Tucson. Raytheon and David Mothman Field were our largest clients. I was fired on the 15th of September after the 9/11 attacks in New York. And I then got another job where I was fired right away again. And then my third job, the boss was really nice And she did not know what was going on, but she came to me and said, look, I got a nice call from this man. He says you're on a blacklist. And I don't know what a blacklist is, but you're on a blacklist, and apparently you're not allowed to work in the United States. And you're doing such a great job here, and that really breaks my heart, but I have to let you go. And then I asked her to repeat it, and I have a sketchbook because I'm an artist, and I got out my sketchbook. It was a Sun Sounds Radio for the Blind, Mitzi Thayan, a really wonderful woman. And she was blind, and she couldn't see that I was writing word for word every single thing with the exact time and date. That book can be found in the archives at the University of Victoria in British Columbia, in my archives there. So if you want to go to that book and look at the exact time, date, and location of that experience. And I never had a job since, and that's been wonderful because I've been able to do nothing but Food+Not+Bombs every second since I got blacklisted. And even though I'm not allowed in other countries and I have a difficult time getting into the U.S., I still make it. I've snuck into Canada a bunch of times, and not usually takes a few days, even though my archive's at the University of Victoria, and I get some kind of $1 zillion tax credit for my Canadian taxes, which I don't pay, and just like I would never pay for war anywhere. So, anyway, that's a little bit of the backstory there. But yeah, so you can, and then as far as if you're local, we need people to participate in emailing City Council in Santa Cruz or anywhere. Anybody listening to this should, if immediately after watching this, write City Council at Santa+Cruz+CA, I believe is the, let me see if I can find it. Now I put it up here. That would be really helpful. It's not on that one. Okay, yeah. So it's City Council at cityofsantacruz.com. Email them saying that you think we should be left alone to continue to share at Laurel and Front Street. End your threats of arrest. The other thing is that you can call the guy that wrote the email, and he deserves a lot of phone calls. And his name is Paul Horvat, and he can be reached at 831-420-5239. And ask for Paul and tell him that you are opposed to this. His email, threatening to arrest us and so on, had a lot of odd characteristics to it. And one of this is that we are going to have our shipping container seized by the city on Friday, the 25th of February. So if you know anything about dates, the 25th of February turns out to be a Thursday. It turns out Friday is the 26th. So we're unclear what this threat even means at this point. But you know, we're trying to build some, and you can email me, get you the announcement of whatever our proposal will be after tonight's meeting. So whether to blockade, as we did before, both at the camp when they're trying to clear San Lorenzo Park, or when the first time they tried to evict us from this parking lot, and so we could potentially use boots on the ground in Santa Cruz to organize around this. And then also we are going to be organizing with a bunch of other local organizations protests against this new completely crazy ordinance that the city is proposing, and which passed on the first reading last night. And I believe March 9th is the next city council meeting where they're supposed to ultimately cast this in stone. And meanwhile, we're looking for legal support because the Union of the Homeless, the Santa Cruz Homeless Union, is discussing suing the city to challenge this under Martin v. Boise as a violation of it. It's a cynical attempt to get around the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal ruling against cruel and unusual punishment. So. Now, sadly, I should potentially go. I'm seeing it's getting close to 12:30, and I have to run downtown and fight cops and stuff. So,
all right, man. Well, I'm gonna reach out to a couple other show hosts that I know to see if they can't squeeze you in the next like couple days, week, something like that. Hopefully before the eviction, hopefully you don't get evicted.
Yeah, correct. But
but hopefully in the next 24, 48 hours, see if we can't get some more ears and eyes on what's going on there. And yeah, man, we'll be following up for sure.
Thank you so much. And I love your show. It's just always watch it. Well, Whitney Webb. Oh God, I'm totally amazed at her. I mean, that's the thing is that one of the things that I became an expert in is surveillance, because I've had my mail confiscated for up to a year at a time, both ingoing and outgoing. I've had bank accounts, the money out of the Food+Not+Bombs account disappeared and then reappear half a year later. I've had FBI become lovers with my wife. I've had I got the stress position cage 3 times in San Francisco after my ligaments and tendons were ripped. I've got FBI problems right now that are pretty exciting, but I essentially swim in surveillance all day, every day. And my poor girlfriend, we went to Hawaii to get away, and we had freaking feds eating with us at the vegan restaurant in Kauai. What the hell? But they got lucky duty, man. But I mean, we got, we have, go to El Salvador, and we get the Federal Bureau of Investigation to visit with us there. And I've got lots and lots of wonderful FBI, internal FBI. I sent you the most recent ones from my FOIA, and my friends that are doing it are like so jazzed. And they're the ones that got the documents about the CIA involvement in Nelson Mandela, for example. And they've gotten a huge number of documents, all kinds of surveillance. And they, even the FBI has said that they know more about FOIAs than they do. And so I'm very excited to look for more. And that's one of the things I love about Whitney Webb, because a lot of the characters in my world are the characters in her stories. And it's just like, whoa, man. I got to have the great honor of almost being killed by Whitey Bulger. And so, that's fun. And if anybody knows who Whitey Bulger was, he was a double agent working for the FBI and the mafia. I got to spend a few times with Michael Dukakis when he was running for president, as he came to hang out with what turned out to be the head of the New England Mafia, who had hired me and then robbed me. So I got some tales. You could get them in my new book, which hopefully will be a new book soon. My friends will be happy that I mentioned it. My writing workshop tomorrow, I'll be able to announce that I actually remembered to say that I'm writing a book, which is mostly what I'm trying to do.
My God, dude, I suck at promoting too. It's a shame, but definitely come back on when the book comes out too, because we'll talk between that. But yeah, thank you again, Keith. Food+Not+Bombs.net. The email address for City of Santa Cruz will be going into the description. So will Paul Horvath's name, and how to contact him. That's already in the chat.
Beautiful.
And yeah, Keith, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's beautiful.
We'll definitely be talking soon.
Great. Take care, everyone. Woohoo! Right. Bye-bye. See you on the streets. That's where it counts. Bye-bye.
100%. And then all you have to do is just close out of the browser for this.
Oh, cool. I will take down all my little windows, and I will do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Keith. And Keith McHenry again. Food Not Bombs. It is insane to me that that feeding people will get you terrorism surveillance. Fucking fascinating, you guys. That was killer. Gonna get Keith. Should probably try and get him on what, tonight, if they're swooping in tomorrow or the next day. Josh, what do you think for ABB?
Probably. I think so.
We'll get a jump on that. I'm gonna call Placone. So okay, I almost feel like this is snitching, but so Keith put me in a DM group with Democracy Now!, Popular Resistance, the ACLU of Northern California, KPFT Radio, and Jimmy+Dore, and I hope that he gets to go on all of those shows. I hope that they all contacted him by means other than responding in that DM, because I did, and that's it. But that's fucked up, you guys. It's fucked up. We'll be back tomorrow night, right? Tomorrow's Thursday. Yeah, tomorrow night at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. And then I am not going to be around Saturday for the vigil. But we'll be back Sunday. I think that's it. I don't know. There will be anonymous bites back in between, I'm sure, and we're gonna try and get Keith on for that. He's got way too many connections with those fools to not have him on. Yeah, thanks you guys. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks again to Keith. Thanks Sleepy Josh on the 1s and 2s. Have a safe flight, Glory Jones. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Love you guys. Good luck to us all.